Hey, good morning, everybody. My name's Tim with the Mariners Museum. In a minute, one of our Department of Interpretation members, Marc Nucup, is going to be presenting on the naming legacies from the Battle of Iwo Jima. Just a few little things before we start. First of all, we'll be doing our usual thing with a Q&A section at the end. So please feel free to go ahead and add your questions to the live chat, and we'll get them over to Marc. Let's see, the next thing that's coming up on the agenda is July 27th at 11 a.m. And that's going to also be with Marc, and that's going to be the naming legacies of the Battle of Okinawa. So it'll be similar to what we're going over today, but about the Okinawa battle. Thanks again for joining us. Please like and subscribe. That kind of thing really does help us out. So without further ado, turn it over to Marc.
Thanks, Tim. It's 2020, so the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Iwo Jima. And in lieu of the museum doing one of its normal, really exciting one-day exhibits, I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation based off of some of the things that we would have done in the one-day exhibition. And in this case, it's discussing vessels in the United States Navy that have been named after individuals associated with the Battle of Iwo Jima. Let me bring up my presentation. And there we go, Tim, we can see that?
Yep.
Excellent. Battle of Iwo Jima took place from the 19th of February to the 25th of March, 1945, though there was still some cleaning up and minor combat taking place after that. Iwo Jima was deemed an important target for the United States forces in the Pacific Theater because capturing it, they could use it as a base for B-29 bombers that were attacking mainland Japan. And this would have cut the distance that the bombers had to fly about half. They had been flying out of Saipan, if I remember correctly, and this shortened the distance significantly. That being said, this was a brutal battle. 110,000 United States troops, mostly Marines, were involved in the invasion. At the time, it was one of the largest invasions that the U.S. had conducted. The defenders were about 21,000 Japanese, and as an indicator of how fierce the fighting was, only 216 of those Japanese defenders survived the battle and were captured, and most of those were wounded or unconscious when they were captured. But the fierceness of the battle meant that for the United States Marine Corps that it was a proud moment in their history because they were able to overcome those odds so impressively. So it's appropriate that the United States Navy, of which the Marine Corps is a part of, commemorates the battle with vessels named after the battle itself or after individuals associated with it. The first ship I want to mention is the USS Iwo Jima. LPH-2 was active from 1961 to 1993, and it was the lead ship of the Iwo Jima class of amphibious assault ships, which look like this. It was built at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Washington. 18,500 tons, 667 crew, could carry about 2,000 troops, again, usually Marines, and about 25 helicopters. The idea being that in the latter half of the 20th century, amphibious invasions were on the way out. Turns out they really weren't, but vertical envelopment, vertical invasions were going to be used. So Marines could be trundled up on these helicopters, dropped where they were needed very quickly. The Iwo Jima was the first ship that was designed and built as an amphibious assault ship. And despite Serving most of her career in the Pacific, she participated in the Cuban Missile Crisis, the US Navy blockade of that island. It also served in Vietnam, in particular ferrying US Army helicopters and equipment to South Vietnam. In 1970, it was the recovery ship for Apollo 13 of movie fame. Did suffer a catastrophic boiler accident during Operation Desert Shield in 1990 that killed 10 people. The vessel itself went out of service and was decommissioned in 1993 and was scrapped in 1995. But that freed up the name to be used on LDH-7, another amphibious assault ship, the USS Iwo Jima. It was commissioned in 2001 and is in service presently. It is a WASP-class amphibious assault ship. It was built at Ingalls Shipbuilding in Mississippi. It's about 41,000 tons, has a crew of 1,200, and it carries around 30 aircraft, depending on its mission, as well as between 2 and 12 landing craft. So the previous Iwo Jima would have deployed its Marines using purely helicopters. The current Iwo Jima can use a combination of both aerial assault as well as amphibious assault. It carries about 1,700 troops. When it was being built in Mississippi, Jack Lucas, who we'll meet later, he placed his Medal of Honor citation in the hull, and it remains within the vessel itself. Iwo Jima has been participating in the current or just ended Iraq War and has deployed numerous times off the coast of Africa. It has also participated in humanitarian missions, the recoveries after Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Matthew. And you can see in this illustration here that it's not just helicopters that the Iwo Jima can carry. It can carry Harriers, which gives it some combat aircraft capability. It's also served in a wide variety of environments. I believe this picture is of it off the coast of Norway, participating in a NATO exercise. Now, moving from the battle itself to individuals associated with the battle, we have the USS Basilone A, which was a destroyer, also classified as a destroyer escort, in service from 1949 to 1997. It was a Gearing class destroyer and destroyer escort. It was built by Consolidated Steel in Texas. 2,400 tons, 345 member crew. And there we go. Earlier in her career, before she had been upgraded into a more advanced warship later in her career. She spent a significant portion of her career as a training vessel for anti-submarine warfare. Of interest to the Mariners Museum audience, it was a spectator ship for the 1970 America's Cup, which was held in Newport, Rhode Island. It also participated in the Vietnam conflict, participating in shore bombardment. It also suffered a boiler explosion in 1973 that killed 7 sailors. After it was decommissioned in 1977, it was in reserve for a little while, and then it was expended as a target ship off the coast of Florida in 1982. And there's a neat photo of her in our collection where she had slipped her anchor in rough weather and run ashore at Fort Story off of Virginia Beach. There is a second USS John Basilone currently under construction at Bath Iron Works up in Maine. The keel was laid in January of 2020, and that'll be an Arleigh Burke class destroyer. But I wanted to mention who John Basilone was. He was born in 1916 in Buffalo, New York. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1936 and spent most of his Army career in the Philippines. He was a boxer with the name of Manila John. After he left the Army in 1939, he re-enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 1940. By 1942, he had been promoted to a sergeant and was part of the 7th Marine Regiment defending Henderson Field during the Guadalcanal campaign. He commanded 2 machine gun sections in the defense of Henderson Field, and that action was so fierce, and he managed to hold his position despite a very, very fierce Japanese attack. That action, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. Being a living Medal of Honor recipient was kind of a novelty. So he spent a period stateside raising money for war bonds, but then he asked to be put back into the front lines. He had been promoted to a gunnery sergeant, and he was part of the Marine Corps invasion of Iwo Jima. He was unfortunately killed the first day of the invasion while single-handedly destroying a Japanese blockhouse. He had led a Marine tank single-handedly through a minefield, and for those actions, he was posthumously granted the Navy Cross. And I may be wrong, but I believe he was the only Marine to be granted both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross in World War II. This is his widow. Also Sergeant Basilone A. She had the honor of commissioning his destroyer. The USS Charles Berry was a Claude Jones class destroyer escort. It was in service from 1959 to 1974. It was built at Avondale Marine Ways in Louisiana. It was a 1,300-ton destroyer escort with a 171 person crew. It was one of only a small class of 4 diesel-powered destroyer escorts, and they were kind of an experiment in producing cheap and rapidly produced warships. However, they were not terribly successful, and after only a decade of service, the entire class of 4 ships were sold to Indonesia, which is what is pictured here, was renamed the Marta Dinata in 1974, decommissioned and sold to Indonesia in 1974. It actually served in the Indonesian Navy until about 2003. Corporal Charles Berry was born in 1923 in Lorain, Ohio. He enlisted in the Marine Corps in October of 1941 and was trained as a para-Marine, Marine who could parachute into action. He fought in the Solomon Islands campaign before joining the newly formed 5th Marine Division for the Iwo Jima invasion. He was killed in action, throwing himself on an exploding grenade to protect his unit. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. A vessel that many people will be familiar with, the USS Cole, in service from 1996 until present, still an active ship. Guided missile destroyer 67 of the Arleigh Burke class. It was built at Ingalls Shipbuilding in Mississippi, 9,000 tons, slightly over 300-person crew. It had a fairly unremarkable career until a suicide attack in 12 October 2000 while it was refueling at Aden, a port in Yemen. The suicide attack left 17 dead and 39 wounded. The ship was damaged enough they didn't want to risk it making a transatlantic voyage. As a result, it was carried by the Dutch heavy lift ship Blue Marlin, across the Atlantic. It was repaired and put back into service in September of 2001. Since then, the Cole has passed through the Gulf of Aden twice, kind of confronting its past without any incident. It is currently stationed out of Norfolk, and the Cole Memorial for the sailors who were killed is at Navy Base Norfolk. Sergeant Darrell Cole was born in Esther, Missouri in 1920. He enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in August of 1941, where he was trained as a bugler. He made repeated requests to be re-rated as a machine gunner and actually served as a machine gunner, but he was actually, his rating wasn't changed until 1941. He participated in the battles of Guadalcanal, Saipan, Tinian, and Palau. But during the invasion of Iwo Jima, he single-handedly attacked 2 enemy gun emplacements, during which he was fatally wounded and was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. The USS Gray was a Knox-class frigate, FF-1054, in service from 1970 until 1971. It was built at Todd Pacific Shipyards in Washington. 4,100 tons, had a crew of 285 individuals. Served almost exclusively in the Pacific and Indian Oceans during its career, but it did include deployments to Vietnam. And shown here, making a high-speed tight turn, it was decommissioned in 1991 and scrapped in 2001. Sergeant Ross Gray was born in Talladega Springs, Alabama. He enlisted in the Marine Corps July of 1942. He took part in the invasions of Roy Namur, Saipan, and Tinian. He attended the Mine and Booby Trap School, learning installation, reconnaissance, and neutralization of minefields. During Iwo Jima, Gray single-handedly attacked 6 enemy positions and subsequently disarmed an entire minefield by himself. This action would lead him to be awarded the Medal of Honor, but unfortunately, it would be awarded to him posthumously. He was fatally wounded 6 days after his heroics, I believe by a grenade. The USS Jack Williams was an Oliver Hazard Perry class frigate in service from 1981 to 1996. It was built at Bath Iron Works in Maine, 4,200 tons, 220 crew, and it carried a single helicopter. It had a remarkably varied career. It engaged in shore bombardment during the U.S. involvement in the Lebanese Civil War. It trained several times north of the Arctic Circle. It conducted counter-narcotics operations in the Caribbean. It participated in 1995 to 1996 in an around-the-world deployment. And it operated with Russian naval vessels at one point during its career. It also can claim that it rescued over 800 Cuban refugees in the Caribbean at sea. It was decommissioned in 1996 and transferred to the Navy of Bahrain. And it's still in service there as the Sabah, which means morning in Arabic. Its namesake is Pharmacist Mate 3rd Class Jack Williams. He was born in 1924 in Harrison, Arkansas. He enlisted in the Navy in June of 1943. He trained at the Naval Hospital School and the Field Medical School and was assigned to the 5th Marine Division for the Iwo Jima invasions. Williams went to the aid of a wounded Marine despite being under enemy fire. Williams shielded the Marine with his body while he was treating him and was wounded himself, shot 4 times. He returned to friendly lines, but came across another wounded Marine who proceeded to treat, and during which he himself finally received a fatal wound from a sniper. He was presented with the Medal of Honor posthumously. The USNS First Lieutenant Jack Loomis is a John P. Bobo class cargo ship. And even though it's you would think almost a unglorious naming to have your namesake on a cargo ship, we're going to see that that's not true at all. The Loomis has been in service since 1986. It is still currently part of the fleet. It was built by General Dynamics in Massachusetts. A little over 44,000 tons, crew of just 73. However, its cargo is what's impressive. It is a preposition cargo ship, and it's operated by the Military Sealift Command, which is a semi-civilian agency that operates auxiliary ships for the U.S. Navy, particularly ships that they don't think are going to be in harm's way in combat zones, so that it can have a primarily civilian crew. This ship carries enough cargo to support a Marine Air-Ground Task Force, which is the overall organizational name for any Marine force that is going to be deployed in a combat or humanitarian situation overseas. It carries enough cargo to support them for 30 days. That means 1.6 million gallons of petroleum, 81,000 gallons of water. It has 162,000 square feet to carry vehicles, and it can carry 522 containers with packed equipment on them. So a remarkably important ship, despite being simply called a cargo vessel. Its namesake is First Lieutenant Jack Loomis, and he was born in Ellis County, Texas in 1915, and he was a two-sport athlete at Baylor. He played professional baseball for the Wichita Falls Spudders and, as illustrated here, football for the New York Giants. He left from the Giants, enlisting in the United States Marine Corps in January of 1942. He initially was a military policeman, a shore patrol, but he eventually went to officer school. Upon his graduation, he was assigned to the 5th Marine Division for the Iwo Jima invasion. He led a rifle platoon assaulting 3 enemy positions, despite being wounded. He was fatally wounded by a landmine at the end of that action and was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. He also is in the New York Giants Ring of Honor. Another cargo vessel is the USNS First Lieutenant Harry L. Martin. It's in service since the year 2000 and still active. It is the only ship in its class, so there's only one Martin class cargo ship. And that's because it's formerly a civilian vessel, the MV Tarago, which was a German-built cargo ship in 1980. It was acquired by the Navy in the 1990s, converted by Atlantic Dry Dock in Florida, and delivered to the Military Sealift Command in 2000. Almost 40,000 tons. It has a crew of 39 people. It's a combination container carrier, which means it carries the cargo containers that you see on the back of tractor trailers, as well as a ro-ro, which means it is a roll-on, roll-off ship. You see that massive ramp on the back. It can simply take vehicle, it can pull up to a dock, extend the ramp. Vehicles can simply drive onto the vessel. When it reaches its destination, vehicles can simply drive off. Very active ship. In fact, it was in Norfolk, Virginia in December of 2019. It is also capable of using that back ramp to deploy Marine Corps amphibious vehicles directly into the water, as illustrated here. First Lieutenant Harry L. Martin was born in 1911 in Bucyrus, Ohio. He was a graduate of Michigan State and employed by the Hawaiian Construction Tunnel Company at the outbreak of World War II. In 1943, he was commissioned into the Marine Corps Reserves and attended engineer schools. He was a company commander for the 5th Pioneer Battalion, 5th Marine Division for the invasion of Okinawa. He organized the defense against an enemy attack on the 26th of March, 1945. He rescued, cut off, and wounded Marines several times before he himself was fatally wounded by a grenade. His actions merited a posthumous award of the Medal of Honor. The USS Stein was a Knox-class destroyer escort, later renamed frigate. Was in service in the U.S. Navy from 1972 to 1992. Was built by Lockheed Shipbuilding in Washington, 4,200 tons with a 385-person crew. It served most of its career on the West Coast, in the Pacific Ocean, and in the Indian Ocean. And it is Shown here, going through rougher seas with a little bit of water going over the bow. And it is notable that in 1987, it became one of the few U.S. Navy ships to ever been attacked by a giant squid. The rubber covering of the hull-mounted sonar dome was discovered to have had claws and suction cups attached to it. Someone had been trying to rip the sonar dome off. Whatever squid it was, they figured it had to have been a very, very large squid. It was decommissioned in 1992 and transferred to the Mexican Navy, where it possibly is still active. I wasn't really able to confirm it. Transferred in 1999. It is the second ship in the background there. It was renamed the Ignacio Allende. The ship's namesake is Corporal Tony Stein, and he was born in 1921 in Dayton, Ohio, enlisted in the Marine Corps September 1942, trained as a paramarine, and he had skills as a toolmaker, so he helped convert a .30 caliber Browning machine gun that he salvaged out of a Navy fighter, and he turned that into his own personal weapon, which he nicknamed Stinger. On the first day of the Iwo Jima invasion, he and Stinger led a series of attacks on enemy bunkers and returned to the beachhead 8 times for ammunition for his machine gun, and each time he brought a wounded Marine with him. These actions would result in the awarding of the Medal of Honor, which unfortunately was presented posthumously. Stein was killed about 3 weeks after his heroic actions. The USS John Willis, in service from 1957 until 1972, is a Dealey-class destroyer escort. It was built by New York Shipbuilding Company, which is in New Jersey. 1,900 tons, 170 crew. Spent most of its career anti-submarine warfare training and patrols in the Atlantic, but it did serve as a demonstration vessel for the Norwegian Navy, who built a similar class of destroyers based off of what they had seen in the John Willis. It was decommissioned in 1972 and sold for scrap in 1973. And here's another dramatic picture of the Willis, in this case, in a stormy sea. Namesake for the vessel was Pharmacist Mate First Class John Willis. He was born in Columbia, Tennessee in 1921, enlisted in the United States Navy November 1940. As a corpsman, he was assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 27th Marines, and landed on the first day of the invasion of Iwo Jima. Wounded while treating other Marines, he refused orders to withdraw behind the front lines. He was attacked still while treating wounded Marines by the enemies with grenades. And according to eyewitnesses, he threw back 8 grenades that had been thrown at him or the wounded Marines that he was training at. He was unfortunately killed by a 9th grenade that he wasn't able to throw back quick enough. He also was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. And I want to leave with one ship, which is probably one of my favorite vessels in the current U.S. Navy, and certainly one of the more intriguing ones of the batch that I'm presenting here today. The USS Hershel Woody Williams is an expeditionary mobile base delivered to the United States Navy in 2018. It still is an active ship today. And if you'll notice here on its insignia that it's USNS, and it has a T prefix, which would have indicated it was part of the Military Sea Lift Command. Well, in March of 2020, the vessel was commissioned as an active warship, USS, and the T was taken away. That's because the Navy determined that in its role as an expeditionary mobile base, it could very well come under fire, and they wanted it to be acting as sailors. This is a sister ship illustrated here, but it's such a powerful image of what an expeditionary mobile base looks like. These are basically mobile bases that can be placed anywhere that other ships and helicopters thus can operate off of. This is the puller itself right there. It has big, wide open deck spaces for helicopters and Osprey to land on. And in this illustration here, you can actually see that it is converted off of, not converted, this was built from the hull up, but off the design of an Alaska class oil tanker. You can see those hull lines there. You can also see that there's a lot of open space underneath the flight deck, which can be filled up with containers. These ships are meant to support minesweeping, special operations, and expeditionary missions, which means, you know, marine invasions and things like that. It is a portable base. The namesake is Chief Warrant Officer Hershel Woody Williams, who was born in 1923 in Quietdale, West Virginia. He enlisted in the Marine Corps in May 1943. After being told he was too short to join the Marine Corps while attempting to enlist in 1942. In 1943, the height restriction was dropped. He is only 5'6". He trained as a demolition specialist, which meant that he operated a flamethrower. He participated in the recapture of Guam and was assigned to the 21st Marines at the Battle of Iwo Jima. On the battle, he attacked multiple pillboxes that were slowing down tanks. Again, this is almost crazy to think about. Tanks could not take out the pillboxes, but this individual with a very, very dangerous weapon that was prone to explode if it was damaged in any way, he attacked the pillboxes and took them out. He repeatedly had to return to the beachhead to refuel his flamethrower before going back in actions. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions. And it's really cool to say that he was not awarded his medal posthumously. He was in Norfolk, Virginia in March 2020, where he attended the commissioning of the ship named in his honor. So that's really, really kind of cool in comparison to the fact that the Medal of Honor was given posthumously to the other namesakes from the Battle of Iwo Jima. And that's my presentation. And I'm hoping that Tim has some questions for me.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Mark. So let's see here. I got one question for you. Is this battle one of the most? Is this battle one of the most with the most Medal of Honors given out?
I do not remember the number of Medal of Honors given out at the Battle of Iwo Jima. It is certainly large. The Battle of Okinawa, I think, has more in terms of more contemporary. The criteria for giving out the Medal of Honor, which first was inaugurated during the Civil War, the criteria changed by World War II, so it was a more rarely awarded medal. It has a very high concentration of Medal of Honor winners, as well as Navy Cross and high-end Valor Awards, but I do not know if it was the highest percentage.
Cool. Let's see. I actually had a question. So has the Japanese Navy named any ships after people or the battle itself?
The Japanese Navy does not have a tradition of naming ships after individuals. They tend to name them after geographic locations or, how do I describe this, meteorological phenomenon, waves and winds and things like that. And in my research, Iwo Jima did not have a significant Japanese naval component to it either. It was almost a Japanese Army thing. Almost exclusively a Japanese Army battle. But when we do the Battle of Okinawa next week, there are some Japanese ships that have namesakes from the Japanese naval ships that participated in the Battle of Okinawa. But the Japanese, I don't think they name any of their vessels after individuals.
Cool. I have another question here. Who makes the decision on what to name ships? Is that the Pentagon officials or other people?
That is a really interesting question that I kind of was anticipating it being asked. So there's actually an office within the Department of the Navy with a group of individuals, usually experienced former, veterans and career bureaucrats who come up with potential names. There are naming conventions in U.S. Navy, in the U.S. Navy that they try to adhere to. For example, former presidents are named for are frequently the namesakes for aircraft carriers. States used to be the namesakes for battleships, but now they tend to be the namesakes for major combatants or ballistic missile submarines or the like. Destroyers tend to be famous individuals, heroes, Navy, Marine Corps, even Army heroes in naval history. Smaller ships, frigates, tend to be important individuals. That being said, there are a lot of exceptions to that. Also, most ships tend to be named after individuals posthumously, but there's about 30 ships that were named after individuals, including the Woody Williams, that were still alive. So what happens is a list of possible names is generated. The Secretary of the Navy, in consultation with Congress and with the President, make the final decision of what the ship is going to be named. Occasionally, the Secretary of Navy will also get a little extra pull, especially for minor combatants. The naming of very large warships and major combatants, that has a lot of input going into it. But there's no hard and fast rules given the number of exceptions. So whatever is approved by the Department of the Navy, Congress, and the President, that's what a ship can be named after.
Great. So I'm just checking the comments right here. Looks like that's pretty much all of the questions that we've had so far. So thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. I wanted to remind you and everyone else that I'll be doing this again next week, same time, same place, and I will cover the namesakes and legacy ships from the Battle of Okinawa, and we'll hit on some of those Japanese namesake ships as well.
Great. Well, on behalf of Mark and the rest of the museum, I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today, and have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Monday at 11 a.m.